story, we can bring in Dick Howard, Distinguished Professor Emeritus at Stony Brook University and author of Shadows of America From Kennedy to Trump, the book published in French. Here you can see Les Hommes de l'Amérique de Kennedy à Trump. Good afternoon.
Hello
Thank you very much for joining us here on France 24. Now, the United States is a country divided. It's been a country divided since Donald Trump won the election in 2016. This impeachment effort is going to solidify those divisions, isn't it?
Certainly it will solidify those divisions for the time being, and I underline for the time being. Ask yourself why someone who voted for Trump in 2016 would still be faithful to that person. And the first thing...
Those people behind him are still, his base is still there.
His base is still there, but why? For two reasons, I think. One, the religious reason, the question of abortion. He published during his campaign a list of those whom he would name as judges to the Supreme Court and to the lower courts of appeals, and that appealed to his religious supporters, of whom there are, after all, 28-30%. Then there were those who were disgusted with the machinations of the Clinton government. Don't forget, Hillary Clinton was the wife of Bill Clinton, who was president of the country from 1992 to 2000, and who remained an influence, and who, moreover, became more and more interested in the material good things. And so you had a rejection of that wing of the party, and you had people who were willing to take a bet. Now, when this begins to come out, you had those same people who still supported. They were still like your people out in the back. But during 2 years, the Democrats kept talking impeachment, impeachment, impeachment. And the Mueller report came out, the investigation of the Russian money came out, and there were no proofs and there was no indictment. There was in the report a statement saying that there was no doubt influence, but there was no collaboration and therefore no indictment. So you had those people who were saying, you see those damn Democrats, they're constantly after him. They won't give him a fair shake. And then now, however, when this newest affair, the Ukrainian affair, comes out, and when it's military people and career civil servants who have worked for both Republican and Democratic presidents, there's a credibility.
I want to talk about that July phone call with Volodymyr Zelensky, the Ukraine's president, where Donald Trump says he did nothing wrong. He said it was a perfect phone call. But now we have more and more people who are coming out and saying, from the testimony which the Democrats have been sharing, that there was in fact a quid pro quo.
And there certainly was a quid pro quo.
So this is the smoking gun?
No, not quite. Remember, I'm old enough to remember Watergate, and the lesson of Richard Nixon that he drew retrospectively was, it's not the crime, it's the cover-up. In other words, when these other listeners, people listening to the
phone call, yes,
saw that the script had been slightly abbreviated and saw, moreover, that it had been put into a separate computer,
server,
not accessible. Now, this awakened suspicion and then began to pile up.
But the White House did. It's fine. The White House did release that transcript pretty quickly off that phone call, if you recall. Incomplete. But from what they did release, it was pretty evident that, allegedly there was like a quid pro quo. I don't want to take a stance here, but it was pretty evident, wouldn't you say?
I certainly would say, but then again, I tend to be not a Trumpian and don't have a stake in that.
Now, I want to talk about those who support Donald Trump, because we did have Lindsey Graham, who came out yesterday once again, and he said, he's basically written off this whole impeachment inquiry as a witch hunt. I mean, at one point, Republicans have to have a backbone instead of standing behind the president, don't they, if they're looking for to reclaim the presidency next year?
I wish that were the case, but I haven't seen it happening in the last 2.5 years. It's quite remarkable that these people who were never Trumpers, who refused to vote for him in 2016, who have not turned against him. The only mild exception was Mitt Romney, the former presidential candidate.
He has been a bit critical of him on Twitter recently in the past few weeks.
I don't know if you've noticed this, but Mitt Romney has admitted that he has a secret Twitter account.
What was it called?
With a French name, Pierre
something.
But he hasn't taken a strong stand. He hasn't tried to become a leader of his party. It's quite astonishing in the last resort for this to be happening. You don't have... Again, if I can remember back to the Watergate affair and the Richard Nixon, you had senators who posed questions, who were open to listening, and you had these public hearings. And don't forget, that's what we're going to have starting next Wednesday. And again, what will the public begin to think? Will there begin to be a shifting? Will there be people who are following?
But I'm sorry to interrupt you, but last year, for instance, I'm just using a different example. I'm not talking about this impeachment inquiry. We did have a Supreme Court justice, somebody who came out and said she was sexually assaulted by Brett Kavanaugh. I was here. I was working this afternoon's shift, and we saw that testimony unfold by Christine Blasey Ford. Yep. And despite this, you still had the Republicans who came out and voted along party lines, Democrats and Republicans on the other side.
Again, I think it can be two things. On the one hand, the religious thing, the question of abortion, the question of the kind of judges he'll name. And secondly, I think it's people who, after 2 years of the Democrats chasing after him, are saying, you've got to do more to convince me than just this. And I think eventually they will be convincible, but that's what those public hearings are all about. And one last allusion to Watergate. What was interesting with Watergate was that you had the same solidity around Nixon, and it gradually began to weaken. And once again, the drips became a waterfall.
Became a splash. We'll see what happens. Dick
Exactly.
Howard, thank you very much for joining us on the program today. Time next for Focus, and today the